From Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to speak as if in morning business.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, since day one, the President of the United States has made it clear his top priority when it comes to health care in our country is to score political points by attacking Obamacare. He has even said repeatedly that health care in our country will, quote, implode. But this was not just a prediction that President Trump made, it was his goal. And he's tried virtually everything he can do to make that implosion a reality. In January, he abruptly pulled funding for outreach days before the end of the 2017 open enrollment period without any analysis of how that might impact patients and families. And he signed executive orders specifically designed to inject uncertainty and increase costs in the healthcare system. President Trump then dedicated the spring and summer to attempting to jam partisan, extraordinarily destructive legislation through the House and Senate to repeal the Affordable Care Act, despite one independent analysis after another showing that each version of Trump Care would cause premiums to spike, take coverage away from millions of people, rip protections away from patients with pre-existing conditions, and gut Medicaid. This fall, after Trump Care failed another time in the Senate, he slashed the investments that help inform families about their coverage options by 90% and followed through on his year-long threat to discontinue payments designed to lower out-of-pocket costs for low-income enrollees. Mr. President, this is a scenario that healthcare experts said would cause mass consumer confusion and anxiety, one that insurance companies planned for by shifting that burden of uncertainty to patients and taxpayers in the form of higher premiums and fewer options in state marketplaces. Now, this is by no means the full list of ways President Trump has attempted to his healthcare sabotage, but it does explain why we are here now. Today is the first day of the open enrollment period for 2018, and as a direct result of this president's actions, families are going to see higher premiums, more out-of-pocket costs, and fewer coverage options. Many families will have to change their coverage if they want to avoid paying hundreds of dollars more in premiums. And at a time when we continue to need to do more to bend the healthcare cost curve in the right direction, taxpayers are being burdened with higher healthcare costs to the federal government, not because of any improvement in quality or comprehensiveness, just because of the chaos this administration has caused. In fact, just last week, the Trump administration proposed a rule to double down on this sabotage in 2019 that would let insurers cover fewer services in addition to raising costs. I have to say, I just truly never imagined a president of the United States would so openly and uncaringly root for the people of this country to be worse off. But that is exactly what President Trump is doing. It needs to be said, and it needs to be stopped. And what makes this even more frustrating is that a lot of it could have been stopped months ago if Republican leaders hadn't insisted on trying to help this administration carry out its partisan, wrecking ball healthcare strategy. Back in September, Chairman Alexander and I were very near an agreement on a bipartisan bill to stabilize the healthcare markets and protect families from higher premiums and out-of-pocket costs. We found ground through regular order, through a process that actually engaged over half the Senate. We were on the verge of reaching an agreement when Republican leaders froze our negotiations. Why? In order to jam Trump Care through the Senate one more time. Let me repeat that. Republican leaders hit the pause button on a bipartisan process that could have lowered premiums and stabilized markets, exposing our patients and our families to the full impact of President Trump's sabotage. That is the bad news, Mr. President. But the good news is that the legislation Chairman Alexander and I ultimately agreed on can and will still have an impact, not just a few years from now, but in 2018, if Republican leaders don't stand in the way again. Our bill would, among other priorities, continue out-of-pocket cost reduction payments and make sure that patients and families, not insurance companies, see the benefit of that certainty in the form of rebates next year. Mr. President, the legislation that Chairman Alexander and I have proposed with 12 Democratic co-sponsors and 12 Republican co-sponsors would do a lot to help us get things back on track. It would tie President Trump's hands on sabotage, and it would send a very powerful message that elected officials in Congress can work together to get things done when we focus on common ground rather than scoring political points. So I would once again urge the Majority Leader, allow our legislation to get a vote. It has the support of 60+ senators, and it is growing. The Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office has said it provides billions in savings and would stabilize the markets this year and lower premiums in 2019. And the President told Chairman Alexander he supports this process moving forward. There is no reason to wait. There's absolutely no excuse for inaction. And I'm going to continue doing everything I can to make clear until Republican leaders finally listen to the patients and families they serve and we move this legislation. Now, Mr. President, while I'm here today, I also want to take a few minutes to speak on another way that President Trump and Republicans, I believe, are taking our country in a direction that is deeply harmful. And that's by stacking our courts with extreme conservative judges. The Senate this week is going to vote on 4 judicial nominees who each have the far-right wing seal of approval. 2 were on President Trump's shortlist for Supreme Court justices, meaning, by the way, that they would automatically vote to overturn Roe v. Wade. Unfortunately, their views on many things, from LGBTQ rights, sexual assault, criminal justice, and corporate interests, are just as deeply troubling. One of the nominees we are considering this week advocated for using electric shock for criminal punishment. And 2, Amy Barrett and Stefanos Bibos, were nominated only after Republicans blocked the nominations of Myra Selby and Rebecca Haywood, who both happen to be African-American women, to the respective benches. Mr. President, it is clear that Republican leaders' list of legislative failures grows stronger. Their effort to enact their agenda by administrative action and by stacking the courts is only going to accelerate. Now, that might appeal to extreme conservatives. In fact, I'm pretty sure it does. But the truth is that whether it's health care or infrastructure or taxes, most people across the country really want to see Congress working together. So I'm going to continue doing everything I can to speak out and fight back against extreme, harmful steps that are being taken by this administration and allowed by Republican leaders here, and also show there is a better way to get things done by working under regular order across the aisle and putting people, not politics, first. That is what our families rightfully expect, and that's what we all should be focused on. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.